Welcome to our Introduction to Discipline workshop. Our series on discipline offers a lot of great tools from which to choose to support you throughout the daily challenges of raising kids. This introduction workshop gives interesting and informative background information on discipline styles and the science around our philosophy that you will find very helpful as you move forward in your journey of raising a family. In this workshop, I will cover a definition of discipline, the goals of discipline, the Your Village philosophy of discipline, different factors and how they affect discipline, and finally, some key terms. The word discipline comes from the Latin word disciplina, which means teaching or learning. So discipline should be about teaching our child, helping our child learn. I don't know where or when the term got changed from its root meaning. When we look at the dictionary today, we see that the modern definition is far from its root. The modern definition states that discipline is control gained by requiring that rules or orders be obeyed and punishing bad behavior. As far as discipline with children, or really anyone, it should never be about punishment. While punishment is a way that has been a popular method of trying to teach, research shows that it's the least effective method. Punishment also has a lot of negative side effects, and we call these the 4 R's. It can build resentment. This comes in when the punishment feels unfair or like an adult is just wielding power to show who's boss, to get compliance. Depending on the child's temperament or how deeply the resentment builds, revenge can be another side effect, the I'll get even. Another side effect could be rebellion. I'll just do what I want to do anyway. And lastly, reduced self-esteem can result for kids who see themselves as bad rather than behavior as unacceptable. If a child starts to feel like a bad person, the cycle can perpetuate. It does not teach how to think, as in values, morals, or judgment. It teaches what to think. Do because I said so. Do so you don't get in trouble, rather than doing or not doing something for the higher reasons of teamwork, cooperation, helping others rather than hurting others. When it comes to the goals for discipline, they are both short and long-term goals. Short-term goals are to develop and entrench desirable social habits. Long-term goals include to build respect, trust, strong communication, and relationships with our children. To foster sound judgment, morals, self-discipline, cooperation, problem-solving, and coping skills. If this sounds like a big job, it is. Based upon current research and both the short and long-term goals of discipline, Your Village has formed our philosophy about how to best relate to and regard one another as family members. Adults have more life experience and therefore are in a position to lead and guide our children. Adults also have needs. Of course, we need to give our best to our children, but we also need to make sure that we are considering our own needs to the degree possible. We are not meant to give and give until we have nothing left. This is not only a disservice to ourselves, but a disservice to our children about what it means to take care of oneself. A parent whose own needs are being met is a much calmer, happier, engaged parent. If you are struggling with this, see the workshop on Peaceful Parenting, Part 1. For children, they deserve dignity and respect. They deserve to be loved for who they are, regardless of what they do. And they deserve opportunities to develop life skills and their personal gifts and talents. The Your Village Discipline series offers a lot of different tools from which to choose. Different tools work better in different situations with different kids, or some tools may just feel more comfortable or natural to different parents. Now I will cover the main factors that can affect the way a parent disciplines. The first factor is birth order. Not only your own birth order, but also the child who may or may not share your same birth order. In this same area, the number of children and the way they are spread, or in many cases, like mine and my husband's, not so spread out. I cover this topic in depth in the workshop on birth order. Another factor affecting discipline is temperament. There are 10 inborn personality traits that all put together make up an individual's unique temperament. This can really affect discipline due to the differences and/or similarities between the parent and child. A parent may be very patient, calm, or understanding with a child of like temperament and may struggle with a child with vastly different temperamental traits than her own. Also, children with different temperaments will respond differently to each discipline tool and therefore have different discipline needs. For these reasons, we also have an excellent workshop on temperament available in the video library. I consider the temperament workshop like this one to be part of Parenting 101. It is so immensely helpful once you learn and understand temperament to connect and guide your child as an individual. Another thing that can have an obvious effect on discipline is whether or not your child has any special needs, be it a chronic illness or mental health diagnosis. Depending on the level of ability or areas of struggle, it can take a lot of extra energy to parent a child with special needs. If you have a child with special needs, we strongly urge you, if you have not already, to seek the help and advice of a professional trained in the area of your child's needs. The last area that has a very strong influence on discipline is parenting style. Parenting style is the way in which a parent relates to his or her children overall. Most parents do not fit one style all the time. We can bounce back and forth depending on the situation or how we are feeling, but usually we fall predominantly in one category or another. The way we were parented will also influence our parenting style. Research shows that parenting styles significantly influence children in areas such as self-esteem, development of autonomy and initiative, and social skills. Because of this, I strongly urge you to do our worksheet, Looking Back, Looking Forward. It has you consider both what you liked and did not like about how you were parented, what you would like to do differently, and what outcomes you would like to be different with your family. There are 4 parenting styles. The first one I will cover is authoritarian. Think of the authoritarian parent as the 1950s model, where children should be seen and not heard. Children are not to question, but are to be obedient. This style of parenting is punitive, controlling. It's low in warmth and responsiveness, demanding, and strict. But it also has clear expectations of behavior, clear consequences that are consistently enforced. And these parents have high expectations. Parents who predominantly use this style rarely engage in respectful communication for explanations of rules, but rather sends the rationale because I said so. Children are expected to conform, be contributing family members, and perform up to their potential. There is no room for compromise, and love feels conditional, and fear is what keeps children in line. Here are some common outcomes for kids raised with authoritarian parenting style. Because these children are always told what to do, they never get practice at making decisions and therefore learning from mistakes, so they tend to be poor problem solvers, anxious, insecure, self-critical, with low self-esteem. They tend to be passive. They score lower on verbal IQ tests because these kids show a lack of verbal reasoning skills. They may rebel in their teenage years, and girls are at greater risk of abusive relationships as adults. The next style is the permissive parenting style. On the positive side, permissive parents tend to be warm, nurturing, and communicative, but they also have no or very lax boundaries and rules. They are unable to take a firm stance. These parents may threaten, but rarely, if ever, follow through. Kids from these homes are overly indulged. Many times, these parents came from rigid, authoritarian parents and fear appearing harsh or fear their children will not love them if they are firm with rules. They never learned how to lay down the rules without the harshness, so they just shy away from it altogether, assuming that it is better than the alternative that they were raised with. In these homes, the balance of power is flipped. The children are in charge most of the time. In these homes, the parents will often plead with the child to comply. For the outcomes, because so little is expected of these kids, they grow into adulthood lacking many basic skills. They tend to have issues with social skills. They are unable to cooperate with peers, unable to take direction from adults, and once they are adults themselves, the pattern continues and they have issues with bosses and coworkers. They lack life skills, responsibility, self-discipline, internal motivation, emotional regulation, so they are impulsive and therefore prone to acting out, which is part of the social skills they never learned. Overall, they are argumentative. They feel entitled. The world owes me. They are highly dependent on others, which makes sense for someone who lacks these life skills. They also can struggle with anxiety and depression and are just generally unhappy adults because they lack self-esteem. A big part of building self-esteem is accomplishment. If a child never really accomplishes much or only accomplishes in one area but lacks basic skills, then he is incompetent. He may realize this and feels like a failure. They are also generally seen as lazy. The third style is disengaged or neglectful. Very few parents have this as their predominant type, but I have seen generally warm, well-meaning parents exhibit a few of these traits from time to time, at the end of a long week or when they are sick or exhausted. I have also had parents who can relate to some of these as a pattern from their own childhood, so it's good to be aware of these for these reasons and be able to address them if needed. These parents are passively unresponsive at best, or overtly rejecting at worst. They have inconsistent and erratic discipline. These children's very existence seems to irritate or burden their parents, so the message they often get is go away and leave me alone. This style is common in parents with addiction, or parents suffering from severe depression, or a parent with a personality disorder such as borderline or narcissistic personality disorder. As you can guess, the outcomes are not good. These kids are at increased risk for delinquency, drug and alcohol use, early sexual contact, and at risk for exploitation. In severe cases, a child can suffer cognitive and/or emotional delays. The last style is known as the democratic or authoritative style. As you may have been able to deduce, it takes the better parts of the first two styles and is a solid middle ground between the two. Obviously, this is the style I advocate following, but only 10 to 12% of parents fall consistently in this style. It is the most effective in producing well-adjusted, responsible, and happy children and adults. Traits of this style are warm and nurturing. The parent is sensitive to the child's needs, with high expectations for behavior, clear communication and guidelines. The parents give explanation and reason for rules and decisions. They expect responsible, mature behavior. They give children opportunities to make decisions and weigh in. They give children choices and set reasonable limits and follow through consistently. They engage with their children in fun and loving ways. As you would expect, the outcomes are positive. Children feel loved and respected. Children feel loved and respected, so children are more cooperative. Children from these homes have good self-esteem, internal motivation, and problem-solving skills. It also fosters positive relationships and communication between parent and child. And research shows as adults, they tend to be independent, self-controlled, successful in relationships. I derive a lot of my tools from positive discipline, a method derived by Jane Nelson, a licensed marriage and family therapist who raised 7 children. She also worked as a school counselor, as well as taught child development at the college level for 10 years. The main mantra for positive discipline is kind and firm. Children need rules and structure with respect. They also need opportunities to learn responsibility, and this means being allowed to make mistakes without shame or fear. If they are coached rather than chastised, then they will have the best opportunity to learn and keep their self-esteem intact. When parents are too strict, children don't learn to be responsible because they are not allowed to learn from mistakes. As I discussed in the beginning, we do not believe in punishment. The idea that you must suffer, I'm so mad that you must feel as bad as I do, is revenge. It does not teach better ways of acting or making better choices. It teaches that when we are mad, we get even. It also teaches what to think, to do it because I said so, or because you will be punished. We want our kids to learn how to think. We want them to think, I shouldn't do this because it will hurt someone's feelings, and along with other higher reasoning skills. This does not mean the child can do whatever he or she wants. In this series, we give many other alternatives to punishment that do teach ways for children to make better choices and learn responsibility, cooperation, and problem solving. Positive discipline, as well as the other tools I discuss in this series, fall into the democratic or authoritative parenting style. Many of the books on the market today also fall into this parenting style, such as the Love and Logic series and the Conscious Discipline method. I also teach several tools from these resources as well, as they all have the same underlying ideals. Here are some tips to keep in mind about discipline and parenting in general. When you change your parenting style, and particularly if you have tended more towards the permissive side, which most parents these days do, you will most likely not get much retaliation from kids 7 and under, but with kids 8 and above, things may get worse before they get better. They have gotten accustomed to the family pattern, so they may work harder to push your buttons. It is extremely important to keep at it to create new family patterns and to make this your new normal. Keeping in mind your long-term goals for your children and your family will help you stick it out when it gets tough. A common pattern in two-parent households is that one parent gets more strict as the other tends to get more lenient, or vice versa, to try to counteract the other parent. Hopefully, you can get both parents on board with using positive discipline, and you will check in with one another and allow each other to help one another when you see the other slipping back to old patterns. If you have a partner who does not want to participate or who is unable to handle constructive criticism, be aware of your patterns and do your best to work on your own without trying to counterbalance and slip back into your old habits. Remember, the way we, the adults, resolve conflict, good or bad, is setting an example for our children of what people look like and sound like when they are angry or frustrated, as well as how we calm down. It's normal to be angry in parenting. Kids benefit from seeing our negative emotions. However, it is important to keep your display of anger short, at moderate levels, and to have a resolution. Short means returning to calm within a few minutes. If you are acting angry daily or dealing with chronic depression, then your children will tend to check out. You will lose the capacity to be the role model. Moderate means showing some emotion. It's okay to have some frustration in your voice, but screaming and yelling and shaming or name calling, any feeling of being out of control, and your children will not feel safe. You want him to feel safe with you. You are their safe harbor in the world. You want to be the person they feel they can go to. So you want to do whatever you can to protect this. If you are struggling with staying in moderation, there are a couple of great workshops on peaceful parenting. Also, the communication tools discusses how to communicate effectively without shaming or escalating the conflict. Links to these workshops can be found in the related workshop section just below this video. And finally, resolution means reconnecting after you share your anger, hurt, or frustration. Apologize and explain. Explain that you are angry, but that you are calm and that you still love your child even when you are upset, and that you will try to do better the next time. Studies show that a parent who apologizes or explains after a display of anger benefits children's self-esteem and development of empathy. Trust me, I know the frustration that parenting can bring. Our oldest was 20 months old when her twins were born, so things can get pretty crazy in our house. Even with all of my knowledge, I have yelled, and I mean loudly, at my kids. And maybe because of what I do, every time I have felt immensely guilty. But the important things are I never call names or use shame or blame. I share my frustrations. Sometimes it's just a bit too loudly, but I always give a very sincere apology and explain. My point is, I'm not the perfect parent who never yells. We do the best we can to keep making progress. Progress, not perfection. No one, I mean no one, is perfect. Here are some helpful terms from psychology that I think are important because understanding these can greatly aid in guiding parenting decisions. The first term is operant conditioning. It is a way of shaping behavior through a system of rewards and/or punishments for a given behavior. This basic concept from Psych 101 has very practical and important applications to human behavior, and therefore parenting. Sometimes parents end up working against their, and therefore their child's best interest unknowingly. So I'm going to cover some basic information on how this works, as well as how it applies to shaping children's behavior. Now, I personally find all of this stuff fascinating, but not everyone does. Hopefully, you will find it interesting enough so you can see how you may use it to your advantage and stay away from making the mistakes that work against everyone's best interest. First, it's important to have a basic understanding of schedules of reinforcement. For each of these, I'm going to use the classic example of a pigeon pecking a lever for a pellet of food. Before you get all glassy-eyed and wonder why in the world I'm talking about pigeons in a science experiment, I promise it's a good example of how some parents unknowingly increase behavior that they do not want to see. So hang with me. I personally find all of this fascinating, but I realize that not everyone does. A fixed ratio schedule is a schedule of reinforcement where a response is reinforced only after a very specific number of responses. This schedule produces a steady rate of response with only a brief pause after the delivery of a reinforcer. So, an FR, fixed ratio 1 schedule, means giving reinforcement, in the case of the pigeon, that's a pellet of food, for every peck of the lever. The rate of response looks like this. The small vertical lines represent the reward. By comparison, here is a fixed ratio 10, meaning the reward is dispersed for every 10th peck. As you can see, the pigeon pecks really hard 10 times in a row to get to the reward of the food and then takes a little rest. So he'll peck, 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 peck 10 times in a row, get the pellet of food, and take a rest. Then peck, 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 peck 10 times in a row, get the pellet of food, and take a little rest. With a variable ratio schedule, a response is reinforced after an unpredictable number of responses. A perfect example is slot machines. You never know when you're going to score, so this results in a high, steady rate of response. The variable ratio schedule looks like this. As you can see, it results in even higher response rate. So you might already be able to see how this spills over. If your child asks for a cookie or a toy at the store and you say, "No, not today," then your child asks again and again and again, and you finally cave in and say, "Oh my goodness, here's your cookie, just stop asking." That is a variable rate of response for the reward of the cookie or toy or back rub or whatever your child asked for that you just gave into after 5 no's. The next time, your child will work even harder to get to the yes. The more this happens, the more you increase what we call the extinction curve. If you ever do decide, okay, we have to put a stop to this, I've seen this happen with parents who try to sleep train and give up halfway through. The next time, it just makes it harder because they have to increase the extinction curve. They have taught their child to just work harder. And I will eventually reward you with what you want. No means yes. Now, if you ever do decide to work to undo a behavior that you have been rewarding through any of these schedules of reinforcement, it's good to be aware of this. You may also get what's called an extinction burst, right before the behavior begins to extinguish or drop off. This is a last-ditch, all-out effort to see if he can get his way. In a graph, the extinction curve looks like this. Along the side, we have the strength of the conditioned response, meaning the more the behavior was rewarded, the stronger the conditioned response is to that reward. So the begging for the cookie or the movie or the not going down to bed at night, the harder you will have to work to undo it. At the top, there you can see an extinction burst, which is that all-out effort right before the behavior extinguishes or drops off. Then the next time the behavior exhibits, the begging or whining or tantrum, the extinction curve is much shorter because the behavior has already begun to be shaped. Another important term to understand is developmental appropriateness. Children go through many stages and grow and develop generally on a similar path, such as crawling before walking. Yet, not all kids crawl first. Developmental appropriateness takes into account the level of physical, social, emotional, and intellectual development of a child. Understanding these and knowing what is normal and having tools to handle these can greatly decrease anxiety around parenting. For instance, children under 3 do not understand the concept of sharing, so expecting a 2-year-old to share will only frustrate both you and your child. By understanding this, along with teaching and working with him on taking turns, is working within the parameters of what would be considered developmentally appropriate for a 2-year-old. Our last term is modeling. This is just what it sounds like. It is the process of exhibiting a behavior that you want to see learned and expressed by others, usually your children. So using table manners, saying please and thank you, asking for what you want nicely, sharing frustrations appropriately, etc. Research on the best ways to shape behavior, along with developing and maintaining healthy parent-child relationships, shows that discipline is best when it is about teaching and coaching our children. We believe in both short and long-term goals for discipline. Short-term being entrenching desirable social habits, and long-term being building strong relationships and fostering good judgment and problem solving. Parenting style, meaning the way we relate to our children, including the way they are disciplined, influences children in many areas, such as motivation and initiative, long-term happiness and success in relationships, self-esteem, and levels of anxiety and depression. The discipline workshops teach parents tools and techniques to allow their children to learn valuable life skills and develop an inner moral compass and motivation by using tools that build respect and communication. The related workshops that you may find of interest are the discipline tools for your child's age, discipline tools for toddlers, preschoolers, elementary age children. Also, understanding development and therefore developmental appropriateness can really help guide you in understanding and working with your child based on her age. Your developing toddler, which is 18 months through age 3, preschool, age 3 to 5, or your child, age 5 to 10. And lastly, our workshops on peaceful parenting can help by giving lots of tools and ideas for staying calm when things heat up. Links to these can be found to the right of this video, just below the handouts. Thanks so much for watching.